In this video, basically what I want to do is I want to discuss, you know, just like a bit of phenomenological reflections about the philosophy of George Berkeley. Um, Basically, the way I think that the two relate. First of all, phenomenology. I have a playlist which has about 85 videos in it, and if you want to know about what that is, you can search the internet. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy has a very good article on it. And phenomenology is something that is somewhat like the logical positivist, somewhat like the empiricists of Berkeley, of Berkeley, Locke, and Hume. But phenomenology is, not is the study of no longer asking the question of mind dependence or mind independence, and just saying, well, the Husserlian, the dictum of Edmund Husserl is to the things themselves, which means we're just going to study the things that are given to us, things that are presented to us, the things that we perceive only, and not ask questions of mind dependence or mind independence, and just go from there and study that and only that. And like I said, I could talk about phenomenology for the rest of my life until I die, and I have about 85 videos of that in various topics in phenomenology. And Berkeley, the way that phenomenology relates to Berkeley is the idea of the abstraction of ideas. Empiricism, in all of its stages, does in a way relate to phenomenology, and abstraction is basically the thing that Berkeley talks about in the principles, or the treatise concerning the principles of human knowledge. It's also discussed in the three dialogues. And basically, what that does is it gives you the thought experiment. He's basically saying that try to think about it in a way where there's the things we perceive and the real objective, absolute reality that is related to or connected to it in some way or another, depending upon the realism that we're discussing. But it's basically to think about the thought experiment of think about it in the secondary qualities, those of the things we perceive, and only that, and also related to in some way, or connected to in some way, the real objective absolute beings. Berkeley's argument is that that objects have properties, and properties are the only thing, and the only thing that makes up a object or a particular. And since that is the case, in the three dialogues, in the first dialogue, Philonous basically makes Hylas admit that each of the sensations that he brings up are mind dependent sensations, and that includes, and I have a video about it. It includes heat, taste, sound, color, size, shape, motion, and solidity. And he's basically saying that since properties are what we perceive, and properties are what make up material objects, then the properties are what we perceive in the objects. And given what he does in the first dialogue, showing all the different kinds of sensory qualities and the sensations, that must be it all must be mind dependent. And basically what he does is he uses that stuff to argue against there being any kind of real absolute objective being of things, because all we perceive is what we perceive, and all we perceive is the properties and the sensory qualities in every single object. And if that's the case, then all we perceive is what we perceive, and we don't have any way of perceiving things that we can't perceive. So the absolute real objective beings that are somehow related or connected to these properties, these collection of properties, because he has a bundle theory of properties. He's kind of saying that since we only perceive the properties of the objects, and that it is shown that the properties involve the sensations that are all shown to be mind dependent, then how can we metaphysically posit a real, absolute objective world if we can't have any perception of it? And it kind of says that, well, since we can't really do that, maybe if I can read something from it to get it better understood for you, because I can't. It's kind of hard for me to give it, because the way he says it is better. I desire anyone to reflect and try whether he can, but by any abstraction of thought, conceive the extension and motion of a body without all other sensible qualities. So the abstraction without all other sensible qualities is that of a real objective being, because what we perceive is all of the sensory qualities, and we only perceive what we perceive. So how can we even think about or conceive of a real absolute objective being? And the way that this relates to phenomenology is that it's putting focus on the things that we perceive, putting focus on what is perceived and the way that we perceive things, and it puts focus on just the empiricist kind of paradigm, or the empiricist focus. And phenomenology really relates this in the way that in the way of how phenomenology focuses also on the way that we perceive things and our perceptions of things themselves. And it's just it's phenomenological in that phenomenology studies only the things that we perceive. And Berkeley is going down that road, that we only perceive what we perceive, and how can we go anywhere else? We perceive what we perceive, and that's it. How can we go anywhere else with it and speculate any kind of real absolute being? And even if we can, ground our metaphysically positing it, even if we can ground our metaphysical positing of this real absolute world, how can we come to epistemic knowledge of that? How can we come to know it if this thing is not part of our perceiving of things? So this is phenomenological in a way, in that it's bringing everything back to our perception of things, bringing everything back to our perception of things. And he states that in the first dialogue, that every sensory quality, every sensation has mind dependence. And it's kind of like how Schopenhauer says, everything we perceive is not, we are not perceiving the sun. We are perceiving AI that perceives a sun. We are always perceiving things in relation to something else, with relation to ourselves, and that's a version of what Berkeley is doing, and it's just like that. Coming back to this, but the only problem that the only thing that that this departs from and makes it not like phenomenology at all is that he comes to a full idealism, and that is also kind of committing a similar crime that he says people are committing, because saying that people are positing mind independence, and saying that we can't have knowledge or metaphysical grounds of positing such a realm of absolute objective being, unless he trashes realism. On the same token, he doesn't understand that. I mean, he might, but he doesn't say that. He doesn't say also that thinking about mind dependence and thinking about there being no real objective absolute world is also not metaphysically grounded to be posited. There's no metaphysical grounds to posit such a world and where everything is mind dependent. So we don't have knowledge or metaphysical grounds to talk about mind independence or mind dependence, and that's what phenomenology is. Phenomenology is choosing to not talk about mind independence or mind dependence. It's just choosing to stick with studying the phenomena, which is not in the Kantian sense, studying the things that themselves, and only those. So Berkeley doesn't really get that. I mean, he's right. He's totally half right, I think, because he's saying that everything is everything. He's basically saying what Schopenhauer says much later, that everything perceived is perceived in relation to something else, thus ourselves. And idealism says that everything is mind dependent. So there is no real, absolutely real, objectively real world, or objectively real things. But the real truth is that we can't have knowledge or metaphysical ground to posit anything like a world. We don't have epistemic or metaphysical grounds for talking about or positing a world that is mind dependent or a world that is mind independent. And Berkeley would be entirely phenomenological if he did not come to the conclusion of a full idealism. And just the reason he's related to phenomenology, which comes much later after him, is because of the way he comes to his conclusion of idealism, not the idealism itself. And the idealism itself is the only departure. The only departure. And I think that's pretty cool to think about. And I think from reading idealist texts and other texts, we can kind of understand how important phenomenology is. And if you are into phenomenology, then you can kind of see this. But if you aren't, then probably not. But I don't know. It's kind of neat to discuss.